Welcome to The Married Therapist,
a relationship podcast
hosted by us, Luis and Amber Simide.
This podcast is all about love, conflict, and the gray areas.
If you like what you hear, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening. Now let's get to the show.
Welcome back to our podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about all things ADHD. We mentioned it in the previous episode, so we want to take time to fully flesh it out. We're going to start with how it presented in Luis's childhood, and then we'll work our way up to present day. So, little baby Luis,
Yes.
how were things growing up?
So before I go into childhood stuff, I wanted to give a little bit of insight into what ADHD even is. I know back in the day there was ADD, and a lot of people think about ADD a very specific way. They think of the kid who's jumping off the walls and things like that. But as of the DSM-5, I believe, it was combined to make ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So there's three different types. So there's ADHD inattentive type, which is what I have, which is primarily the inattentive piece of things. And then there's ADHD hyperactive, where hyperactivity is the dominant feature. And then there's combined type, which I would say most people probably have combined. Especially with kids that I've worked with, they have ADHD combined type, where they have features of both. So I grew up with inattentive is what I still have. So people with inattentive are often overlooked because it's not that hyperactive kid that most people see as having ADD or ADHD. And because you're not a behavioral problem, it's not addressed really. It's just an attention thing, or it might take a little bit of time to get things done, or procrastinating, things like that. So that's how it really showed up for me. Like, I was very much a procrastinator. I used to joke that I put the pro in procrastination, which I still do, but I've learned over the years to be more proactive with things. But yeah, that's how I grew up. I was very much a procrastinator. I did everything at the last minute. I did everything well. So I did work, and I do work well under pressure. So whenever there is a deadline, I really wait until the last minute that I can do it, and then I just get all of it done. There's a saying that people with ADHD can take all day to do an hour's worth of work, or they can do a full day's worth of work in 1 hour. So it's two extremes on opposite ends of the spectrum. But yeah, that's how it would look growing up. So one of the other features is you can hyper focus on something, and you really want to get everything done in one fell swoop. So you don't want to break things up. You don't want to break momentum. And I remember there was this moment in third grade where we were writing a story, and our teachers were like, "All right, put your pencils down, you're done." But I wasn't done writing my story. And so I wanted to keep writing. And so my teacher kept like getting on to me, like, "You need to stop." And I got so mad, like I threw my stuff on the ground. And then my mom had to come in for a conference. It was a whole thing. But I think about that as like one of the early signs that it wasn't typical of how I functioned. But again, I was a good student. I wasn't getting in trouble, so it was never really addressed. And yeah, all through middle school, all through high school, that's really how it looked. I was very much a procrastinator and do all of it all at once because I didn't want to break it up into chunks, because in my mind, I just want to get one complete thought out. And that's how it looked, and that's it really just continued into college. In college, there was, oh my gosh, I think my junior year of college, I had a 16-page paper to write. It was a psychology paper about human development and things like that. And I wrote the entire 16-page paper in one night. And I did not go to sleep that night. And I got 100 on the paper. I did really well on it. But yeah, so that's just how how it looked. And I think for me, it worked for so long, but it really did a number on my brain. And as I got older, it's like my brain just got more fatigued from doing that over the years. That as I became an adult and I started working, there was still that habit of procrastinating and doing things at the last minute. And by that time, my brain was just tired. And so I had less tolerance for that. And then I started to burn out in jobs, and was switching jobs pretty frequently, especially at the beginning of my career. I really didn't stay somewhere for more than like a year or so, because I would just burnout and all of that. And so then I get into teaching, and I'm a special ed teacher. And being a teacher in and of itself, any of you guys listening who is a teacher, hats off to you. I know it's very stressful. So being a teacher and being a special ed teacher on top of that was just extremely stressful. And again, I was just running on fumes because I was doing all of these things and again waiting to the last minute and then just kind of trying to organize everything in my brain. So that became really difficult as I was a teacher. But
Okay. So when did you hit rock bottom? Because you were talking about running on fumes and just really getting to a point where things were really difficult. So what did that look like?
yeah, so actually my last year teaching, we've mentioned it before in another episode how I stopped teaching in 2018. And so the story behind that is I reached a breaking point when I was in my 5th year teaching that I just completely burned out and I had this really difficult situation at work happen and I just left. I left work that day and I was just like in fight or flight mode and I just could not imagine myself going back. And at that time, my solution was to go to Australia. So I went home that day from work and booked a ticket to Australia that night, got my travel visa that night, and left for Australia the next day. And I was just there. I didn't tell anyone that I was going. And in hindsight, it seems like a cool story, but it really was a difficult season for me and difficult for the people around me to see.
What's a
It,
crisis?
I was in crisis for sure. And at the time, I attributed it mainly to depression. At that point, I knew I dealt with depression on some level. And so I just felt like that's what it was. It was depression, it was being burnt out, it was at the end of my rope. And it wasn't until I came back and I started entering therapy that they introduced anxiety as part of my diagnosis. And so that's just kind of how that progressed from there. And then I went to therapy, and that was helpful, and just kind of went from. And that's actually when I entered grad school and started that whole journey.
Okay. So that's so interesting because you recently got diagnosed with ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole time
Yeah.
you had no idea that that was it. Mainly you were thinking that your symptoms were because of depression,
Mm-hmm.
and then anxiety gets thrown into the mix.
Yeah.
So I can imagine you were addressing some of the symptoms, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you weren't fully
Right.
able to do that because you just didn't know because
Yeah.
of the way that ADHD presented with you.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like you said earlier, it wasn't this classic hyperactive
Right.
ADHD. It was that quiet, inattentive.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of having this silent mental battle.
Yeah.
And so, just wanted to say that again, just to remind people of
Yeah.
what was going on at that time.
Yeah. And funny enough, those three tend to, I always say, hang out with each other: anxiety, depression, and ADHD. And the reason is because, especially with inattentive, it is overlooked. And so people with inattentive ADHD, they end up living their life feeling like something is wrong with them and not being able to get things done. And so it increases that anxiety because they can't get things done. And then because they're feeling down on themselves, that depression comes in and they're just like, there's no hope and all of that. And so I think for a lot of people, especially if they don't know they have ADHD, when they finally get that diagnosis and start addressing that, the other two tend to subside or not show up as much as everything else. And that was definitely my story.
Okay, so with this storyline, you went to Australia, you
Mm-hmm.
got back, you got the diagnosis of depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
And then where are we now?
Yeah. So at this point, obviously, I'm not working. I sent my letter of resignation from the hostel I was staying at in Australia, which on one hand is iconic, but on the other hand is very sad and crisis. But yeah, so when I came back, I obviously had to make money. I'm living on my own at this point. So I just start Ubering and start doing just different gig work. And I got back, this was in October of 2018. And I started Ubering shortly after that, probably in November or so. And I did that full time, Ubering, and then also doing Lyft until the fall semester when I started grad school. And I continued to Uber, but I wasn't in grad school until that following fall of 2019. So yeah, so that's just what I did. I had a schedule for myself, which in retrospect was really helpful for my ADHD, just having a very strict schedule for Ubering because I knew the specific times that were popular. So I would get up probably 6 in the morning or so and do from 6 to 10 to get like airport and work people, and then I take a break in the middle of the day and then do 4 to 8 or so. People are getting off of work, going to dinner, all that stuff. So that's kind of what life looked like for the next 6 months or so.
So even though you didn't know you had ADHD, naturally you just knew that you really thrived off of structure and routine
Yeah.
and order. So that's common, finding those little
Mm-hmm.
workarounds
Yeah.
for people
Yeah.
with ADHD in order to survive.
Really. Yeah. And I didn't conceptualize it as that. Like I work well with structure, but when I did it, it always felt good. So that's an interesting paradox that I have discovered over the years is I tend to work well with structure, but it's often difficult for me to put that structure in place. But once I put the structure in place, then it's a lot easier for me to function. So yeah, so that's just kind of how I lived my life for those 6, 7 months or so, just being very structured, being very regimented, and getting my schedule out and doing what I need to do at that point.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it sounds like that was a pattern no matter what was happening, whether it was a job or school.
yeah,
So then, when did you finally get diagnosed? And what led you to actually seek a diagnosis? Because again, this whole time you're
yeah.
thinking at this point, sounds like it was mainly anxiety.
Hmm.
So, yeah, what was that process like?
So I didn't get diagnosed, as you know, until January of 2024. So just over a year, less than a year and a half ago. The thing that really started to pique my interest, honestly, was social media because I saw a lot of creators or a lot of people talking about their late diagnosis of ADHD and what that looked like. And it really resonated with me as far as people often procrastinating or being forgetful or always losing things like that. And then I saw someone talk about how they would often jump from job to job because they would burn out and all of these things. And I started to wonder, I was like, I wonder if that's true with me. And so I started to look at the diagnostic criteria for it. And after I looked through it, I was like, I think I might meet criteria for that, honestly. So I sought out a diagnosis. So I went to a psychiatrist. Um, and asked her about testing and things like that. And she said something that was really funny. She said, pretty much everyone that comes to me thinking they have ADHD, they have it because there was enough worry and enough symptoms that they came to seek out a diagnosis. And so I did that. And sure enough, I definitely had it. I really liked the way that she tested me. It was an objective diagnostic testing, so it wasn't subjective where you're just kind of rating on a scale yourself. It was a thing that I did that was on the computer that really tested for it. And it had a camera to see if you were moving around and things like that. Anyway, so I was diagnosed with inattentive, and she said that I actually was on the pretty severe side of things, which wasn't surprising to me. It was honestly validating. I'm like, okay, my brain is just wired differently. That's what's been going on. And honestly, it was like this light bulb moment. And once I got on medication, it really just changed so much of how I operated and how I thought. I remember telling you that I can't believe this is how people think all the time. Their brain isn't just jumbled up all over the place all the time. And I just thought that was my normal experience where it's just hard to focus and whatever, which in retrospect sounds crazy because that's not how a brain should function. You shouldn't be jumbled all the time. But
But that's how you've been your entire life.
yeah, that's all I knew. And so I just figured that's how I am. So that's probably how everyone is. But it just wasn't. So,
And when it comes to medication, can you speak a little bit about that? There's
yeah.
different types and
Yeah. So the two dominant types of medication that people take for ADHD are either stimulants or non stimulants. Most often, people are prescribed stimulants, things like Adderall or things like that. But
Vyvanse.
Vyvanse, yeah. And I was prescribed a non-stimulant mainly because I also have generalized anxiety disorder, and a lot of times stimulants can exacerbate anxiety. So my psychiatrist wanted to do a non-stimulant just to not make that worse, which was really helpful for me. And for younger kids, what we see in the place where I work is sometimes the stimulants can increase aggressive behavior. If they already have a predisposition to aggression, then it could potentially make that aggressive behavior worse. So it kind of just depends. A lot of it is trial and error, unfortunately. Luckily, mine worked really well the first time, so there wasn't this back and forth with medications. But yeah, that's what I was on, and it's Strattera or atomoxetine is what I'm taking, and it's
Yeah.
been really helpful.
And we would just say for those who may think they have ADHD, go to your psychiatrist, but also psychiatric nurse practitioners can do the same thing
Yeah.
and talk to them about your symptoms. They will tailor the treatment plan specifically for you. Maybe your path would be like Luis's, but
Hmm.
maybe you would be a person who would benefit more from a stimulant. So just
Yeah.
throwing that out there.
Yeah, and the reality is if you have ADHD, you don't necessarily have to be on medication. It really just depends on how much it's impairing your daily functioning, because some people, just doing some simple skills training and therapy can be helpful to manage, but some people, they definitely need the skills training and therapy along with the medication to help out, and that's definitely my case. And so I, after that, shortly after that, probably a year after my diagnosis, I switched therapists to one who specializes in ADHD because I started to recognize that most of the challenges that I was having were because of the ADHD, not as much because of the anxiety, which is what I thought it was. So I made that switch later on, and that was really helpful for me too.
Okay. Sounds good. So you got the diagnosis, you're on medication, you realize that life is so much brighter.
Yeah.
And so at this point, how are things with work? Did you notice a huge shift?
Yeah, for sure. Because with work, there's just a lot of moving pieces, right? I do therapy for individuals with the kids, and I do family therapy with them also. And then I also lead groups sometimes. And there's just a lot of things that involves. And the therapy itself wasn't bad. I would be able to do that fine. Really, just the notes, being able to keep up with doing the notes regularly. That's something that was really difficult for me. And so I would often fluctuate. Sometimes I would be right on top of things when I had that motivation, but then oftentimes that would last for about a week. And then I would be falling behind for like 2 or 3 weeks and then slowly catch up. And it was just this back and forth all the time that I was recognizing was draining on me. And that's really the pattern that I noticed in a lot of my jobs where I could do the work for a short period of time, but then I start falling behind. Then I could do the work, and it's just this constant tug and pull. And once I started the meds, I was able to really slow my brain down, get my work done, and increase my motivation. And I was able to just get things done at a regular pace, which was so incredible for me. I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I felt like Superman. I was like, wow, I have nothing to do because I've done all my work. Incredible. But yeah, so that it was really great for me for work.
Okay. And can you speak to dopamine and
Yeah.
what that is and how that impacts someone like yourself with a neurospicy brain?
Yeah, so dopamine is like a feel good chemical in our brain that increases motivation and things like that, and increases like just enjoyment of things. And so serotonin and dopamine are the two main neurotransmitters that make you feel good. And oftentimes people with ADHD lack that dopamine to increase their motivation or increases pleasure in different things. So oftentimes when there is that deficit of dopamine, it can feel like depression, which is why many people confuse the two, or they think they have depression when it's really just ADHD. And as I was able to complete tasks, the dopamine naturally increased in my brain, which then motivated me to do more tasks and do it regularly. And yeah, so that's been a really helpful thing for me to recognize and to see that okay, this is what's been part of the equation this whole time, and now that it's there, the whole equation makes sense.
Yeah, and what's important to remember is that someone like you with ADHD is not dumb, you're not lazy. or crazy.
Yeah.
It's literally the chemistry of your brain,
Yeah.
which you didn't ask for,
Right.
right? And that's why ADHD is classified as a neurodevelopmental disorder.
Hmm.
It's just how you were born.
Yeah, and it often runs in families. So if you have a family history of ADHD, you do have a higher chance of developing it yourself or having it yourself. And we often see that with the kids that I work with. When one kid is diagnosed, you often see other people in their family that have it too. So it is one of those things to look for if you have ADHD or if you think you might have it, look at your family to see if anyone else has it. Then it might be a more clear indication that you might have it too.
Okay. So now we can talk about how it's presented in our relationship.
Yeah. And it's been tricky because we have both been learning at the same time because I was just diagnosed and obviously I was with you at the time. And so we're just kind of learning how this presents and what is ADHD, what is anxiety, and what is just me as a person, right? So I think at the beginning it was difficult because I needed that structure, that routine, that predictability. And you were a lot more spontaneous in a lot of things. And the way it presented mainly for us was in sex. So for me, I needed that predictability to know that it was going to happen because when it caught me off guard, I would kind of get flustered and like, oh my gosh, what's going on? I wasn't expecting this to happen, and it would be really difficult for me to get into that space, which for you turned into rejection a lot of times, and then it just created this dynamic where I was constantly feeling overwhelmed, and then you were feeling rejected, and then I was feeling guilty. So there was this constant back and forth at the beginning, but then once I recognized that I had ADHD, it really explained a lot. It didn't take away the hurt for you specifically because it still hurts, right? And it didn't necessarily take the guilt away from me completely, but it did help me conceptualize it as okay, this is the way my brain is working, and this isn't a thing that has to do with me as a person. So that was really helpful to shift that mindset. But I know you can speak to your experience and what that was like for you.
Yeah, I agree that it didn't take it away 100%. It definitely helped.
Mm-hmm.
I had a mindset shift. So I realized you're not rejecting me. It's simply that your brain cannot compute what's happening. And
Yeah.
as an example, again, you love structure, you love routine, you love order. Well, it's not that you love it, you need that.
Yeah.
So you coming home, making dinner, and then we transition to watching TV, and then we transition to getting ready for bed, and then we go to bed. That is typically how we do things.
Yeah.
And so that is what you anticipate.
Mm-hmm.
So there were times early on when I would throw things off. So maybe after cooking and watching a little bit of TV, I would want to transition to sex, but you weren't ready because this is not what we do.
Yeah.
So then you would either say no or it would just be kind of an awkward, uncomfortable thing, which ruins the vibe.
Yeah.
And so in the moment, I was just like, hey, I was just trying to be flirty and sexy and things like that. But again, that just wasn't a part of it. And I
Yeah.
just thought, hey, we just got married. We're newlyweds.
Yeah.
You're rejecting me. And obviously that feels uncomfortable. But I've just learned, okay, he has ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
So what does his brain need? And I talked to my therapist about it many times. And she told me essentially, like, stop fighting it,
Mm-hmm.
work with it. And I don't
Yeah.
know if I told you, I think I did. I named your brain.
I think you did. I forgot what you named it, but I think you remember. That sounds familiar that you did that.
Yeah, I won't say the name, but um it was just like, what does, let's just call it brain. What does brain need?
Mm-hmm.
We have to give it food.
Yeah.
It needs to be satisfied. We won't get anywhere if we're starving brain.
Right.
So, what does brain need? Okay, order, structure, routine. How can I give that to you? So, as an example, okay, maybe I can send flirty text throughout the day
Mm-hmm.
to let you know that it's coming.
Yeah.
So that way you can anticipate it. So when you come home, cook dinner, it's top of mind.
Yeah.
And for me, it wasn't easy because I still really liked that spontaneous aspect.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, this is not going away. Yes, you're now medicated, and that's great. And you're getting skills training and therapy, but it's still there.
Yeah.
So let's stop going against the current.
Yeah.
So that's how it's been for me.
Yeah.
Is it still a thing that pops up? Yes,
Mm-hmm.
but it's gone a lot better.
Yeah, so my brain really does thrive on structure, order, and routine. But I think the piece of it that is the most important is the predictability, because in that structure, in that routine, in that order, there is that inherent predictability. And so for me, if something is going to change and things are going to be out of that normal order, it's like my brain needs to be able to predict that it's going to change in order for me to feel comfortable and safe and not increase that anxiety that comes with the unpredictability that often causes that anxiety to happen. So yes, I love that you are learning that along with me, and that you're not just putting this all on me to learn and communicate to you. Yes, there was a lot of onus on me to learn about myself and learn how to communicate things to you, but you're doing a lot of the legwork yourself just to increase your own knowledge, which for me is so loving, and so I love that you do that.
Mm.
So I we mentioned that in the previous episode, that that's one of the things that I appreciate that you do, that I didn't ask for you to do, but I absolutely appreciate it. So thank you for that.
Of course. Yeah. I think it's really important for anyone to do, whether it's a mental health diagnosis like
Mm-hmm.
this or if it's a physical health diagnosis.
Yeah.
We love each other. And that's
Yeah.
a way to love and support someone is to do the research.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps me understand you. And then it helps me understand how I need to move and shake.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I didn't have all this knowledge, I would just continue to be frustrated
Yeah.
because you reject me time and time again, is what I would be telling myself.
Yeah.
So, absolutely.
Yeah, and I know you had challenges with personalizing things, right? Where you feel like it was a you problem when really it was a me problem. And it wasn't even a me problem, it was like a brain problem. And because you would personalize it, then I would also personalize it. So there was all this personalization going on before the diagnosis. And even after the diagnosis, I think it happens on some level, but it's easier to combat that now that we know that it's my brain that we're fighting against. But and I think one thing that you said that your therapist encouraged you to do was working with the brain, with what it naturally does. And I'm in the process of switching therapists to address trauma. And that's something that he talked about too, because he also specializes in ADHD. And he talked about having more of a collaborative approach with my brain rather than this antagonistic approach where I'm trying to fight against it, what it naturally wants to do, and instead go along with it and do what needs to be done in a way that encourages what the brain actually wants to do. So yeah, so I love that we are on this journey together and figuring things out.
Yeah, it's definitely a radical acceptance.
It is, yeah, because I think we both had an idea of what life, quote unquote, should look like, and because it looks different, we were feeling like things were wrong. So I think just recognizing there's no way things should look. We are who we are, and our life is our life. So just because it doesn't look like someone else's life doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means this is our life and it's different.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's a social construct.
Yeah.
It should be this way as
Yeah.
newlyweds. I like to say to my clients and remind myself, according to who?
Yeah.
Who is this council who determines what things should be? I actually was looking at a TikTok recently, and the host was interviewing, I believe she was a psychologist, and she asked her, when it comes to the frequency of sex, what's the standard? What is healthy?
Mm-hmm.
What's unhealthy? And I love that the psychologist said, it's whatever the two consenting adults agree to.
Yeah. Yeah.
there's no number. And if that's what you were wanting to hear, sorry, you're not going to get that from me. She didn't say this, but she was inferring.
Yeah.
It is so different. It really depends on natural libido, but
Mm-hmm.
then environmental factors like, do you have kids?
Yeah.
Do you work the night shift?
Mm-hmm.
Are you more spontaneous like me, or are you more planned like yourself?
Yeah.
And then there's physical health issues.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, certain people, mainly women, they need that emotional connection before doing anything physical. So there's all these different variabilities. So I just love that that's how she answered it, because it's so true.
Yeah. And I think thinking about gender roles and all of that, the dominant discourse in society is that the guy is always just ready to go at any moment. The wind blows and he's ready to have sex in that moment. And I think that's, in my mind, and probably in your mind too, what life would look like. And that's just not how my brain is wired. And that took some time to really accept and to recognize that this is our life. The way that other people do things isn't right, and it's not wrong, it's just different, and that's
Right.
okay.
And that doesn't make you less of a man.
Right.
And yeah, I'll be honest, I definitely thought that that's how things were going to be with us.
Yeah.
And I had to, again, do a mindset shift.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, hold on. What do I have?
Right.
And again, what does brain need?
Yeah.
It's not what the movies show
Right.
or what social media shows. It's very different.
Yeah, and I think I'm just realizing this now, actually, in real time, that I think looking back at the honeymoon and even to a lesser degree when we were dating, overall there wasn't that structure, and so I think in those moments it was a lot easier for me to be more spontaneous and more just kind of ready, because that unpredictability was the predictability, if that makes sense. Like, that's what normal looked like. It
Mm-hmm.
was very unstructured. But when we got married and we entered into this more structured life, having an unstructured sex life or more spontaneity didn't coincide with a structured life. So I think that made things a little bit more tricky too, because coming off of the honeymoon where we just got married, there's all these emotions, sex is happening fairly frequently, and then coming to our structured life, there was this disconnect. Like, we just had this incredible time. Why is it not the same? And in my brain, there were two very separate settings and two separate forms of structure or lack thereof. And so I think naturally my brain just switched back to structured mode. And then our life wasn't like that.
Yeah. And we didn't live together
Yeah.
before we got married.
Yeah.
So just reminding people that's why things were so much different, and it was
Yeah.
a bigger transition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. We can maybe talk about how, like, things that I do right now that's really helpful for my ADHD, not just in the home, but also at work.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I do, I keep a paper calendar. There's something about just seeing it written down, being able to cross off everything, that's really helpful for my brain just to conceptualize things. Because if it's in my phone, one, I get distracted by my phone. So I go on my calendar and the next thing I'm on Instagram for 2 hours. I'm like, well, I was supposed to look at my calendar. What's happening? And so having a paper calendar where that's the only function of the calendar just for schedules, I can look at it, see what needs to be done, see what's going to happen tomorrow, have that predictability, and just get ahead of my brain. So that's really helpful. And one thing that you're really good at is just reminding me to set alarms for things, because I would say out loud, "Oh, I need to remember to do this," and then you're just like, "Do you think you should set an alarm for that?" I'm like, yes, yes, I should. Thank you for that reminder.
And I don't have ADHD, but I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I cannot trust that my little brain is going to remember this tiny thing,
Yeah.
especially as a business owner. There's a lot going on. So when I say that to you, it's not like, hey, Mr. ADHD,
Yeah.
you know you're not going to remember. It's like, I know this is helpful for me and I don't even have it. So I can imagine it's probably more helpful for you.
Yeah. And fortunately, historically, my brain has just randomly remembered things that I'm supposed to remember at the right time. I don't know how they, it's honestly miraculous sometimes, but the alarms are absolutely helpful. And I do it all the time at work too. If I need to remember to send an email at the end of the day, I set an alarm at the beginning of the day and, like, send this email. And nine times out of 10, when that alarm goes off, I completely forgot that I was supposed to do
Oh, yeah,
it.
same. And I always thank my previous self.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's been a huge help for us. And something that I do, that I do at the end of the night a lot of times that in retrospect was a function of the ADHD that used to be, I wouldn't say annoying for you, maybe a little bit annoying, was just going over the next day's schedule, just thinking like, okay, I got to get up, I have to be at work at this time, I have these many clients to see that day, and you're just like, why do you have to do that? I'm just like, I just like, and I think now that makes sense why I needed to do that. It was more so prepping my brain for what's to come. And now you're just like, are you talking to me or are you talking to yourself? Most of the time I'm talking to myself, so I just say, nope, talking to myself. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and just to clarify that situation, so it's the end of the night, we're in bed, getting ready to obviously go to sleep, and you're running through the task for the next day.
Yeah.
But sometimes you would get anxious. And
Hmm.
so I'm zen, I'm chill, and I didn't like it because it felt like you were pulling me into that.
Yeah.
And I was just like, hey, and obviously, if you wanted to process something, we could. But I would ask that. I'm like, hey, are you just externally processing
Hmm.
as an individual, or are you externally processing wanting me to help you problem solve? And you would be like, 99.9% of the time, oh no, I'm just kind of running it through just for myself. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, okay.
So then you can turn your ears off. It's like, I don't need to listen to that.
Right. So I'm like, let me jump back on Instagram or let me turn back over so I can begin falling asleep. Um, and for me, I'm very much all about being present minded.
Yeah.
So at that time, I'm tired, I'm so excited. And I just felt like it was a threat to that. I was
Hmm.
like, we're not at tomorrow. Another thing, too, when you would talk about your day, it made me think of my day.
Yeah.
And I love what I do, and I also love when I'm not working because rest and rejuvenation is really important.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was annoying and confusing in the beginning, but now I know
Yeah.
that's your process. Leave you be. If you did want me to assist with problem solving, you would let me know.
Yeah, for sure. And I still do it. I mean, obviously, I do it to this day, and it's something that you've kind of been able to tune out. It's more so you're just clarifying that it's not having to do with you, more so than asking. And so that's, I know that's something that we just do. It's a nightly thing. Um, so also there are some practical things that we do around the house that are helpful for me. One thing is just having a spot for all my things. So I have a hook that I put my backpack on that I take to work. I have a hook for my keys, and I have a spot for wallet. Like I just have a spot that I put everything on a routine, so I know it's there and I'm not going to lose it.
Your little station.
I have my little stations around it. So it seems so silly when you put it in those terms, but it's really helpful for my brain. So I'm not having to think, because that's the thing. The less things I have to think about, the better it is for my day, because my brain is already going a million miles a minute. So if I can just have my brain work on the things that I need to think about and not where my keys are at, I can just function a lot better throughout my day.
Yeah, because before you had the station, especially at our apartment, you would be really worried. We'd
Yeah.
be ready to go, and it's like, where are my keys? Where's my phone? Where's my wallet? Where are my glasses?
Yeah.
And we're already, if we hesitate, we're gonna be late, and so it's embarrassing too for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So it's not silly. It's actually really smart to have your station.
And at work, I have a key that to get into my office that I just keep on a rubber wristband thing just so I don't lose it, because if I had a loose key somewhere, it would absolutely be lost in 2 days. So I just keep it there so I know where it's at all times. I can't lose it. It's on my arm. And that's been a game changer for me too. Because yeah, I when I first started working there, I just had it in my pocket. And oftentimes I'd have to remember to get it from home or get it in my car. And I'd forget it at home all the time. And it was a whole thing. So I was like, let me just attach it to my body so I know where it's at all times, keep it in my car so I don't ever leave it at home or anything like that. So it stays in my car, and that helps me out just in general at work.
Yeah, you have so much to do at work.
I know.
So it's basically,
Keeping track of a key is not one of the things I want to be thinking about.
yes, exactly. The focus is therapizing.
Yes. And then the last thing I want to talk about that is really helpful for people with ADHD in general, but specifically for me and for us, is body doubling. So, body doubling, for those who don't know, is literally someone just being there, not necessarily doing anything with you, but just being there so you can get your thing done. So, an example of that would be just the other day, I was editing a podcast episode in bed, and you were just doing some work, admin work on your laptop next to me. And even though you weren't doing anything with me specifically, just your presence was helpful for me to stay motivated to get things done, because this has happened so often where you go to bed before I do, especially on a weekend, and I'm on my phone and I end up spending 2 hours on my phone scrolling and just procrastinating going to sleep. And then I'm like, oh, I gotta go to bed. Or you you might you might wake up and you're like, what time is it? I'm like, oh, I'm like, I'm caught like a kid.
I'm like, it is 3 a.m.
Yeah, and so I just have to like, okay. But I think if you were up, even if you were scrolling, but just up next to me, like you were present with me, that would have been more of a cue for me. Like, okay, I need to go to bed and wind down. And one other example would be when I'm budgeting. I do the financial management for us, and I do it on my phone. And if you weren't here next to me while I was doing it, it would probably take me 3 hours to do it because I would get distracted on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube and then have to go back to it. But just you being here is helpful for me to just stay focused and get what I need to get done. And you don't have to be like, hey, make sure you're doing it. Like there's no instruction or you're not parenting me or anything like that. You're just there and that keeps me more focused.
I like to call that the ministry of presence.
Yeah, so the ministry of your presence is helpful for me to get my things done. Is yeah, it's so helpful because honestly, I don't know how I lived on my own for so long because and honestly, when I was living on my own, it would take me all day to clean my apartment. And my apartment was 300 square feet. It was extremely small. It should have taken me 20 minutes to clean everything. But cleaning my apartment was a whole day because I would get so distracted by just other things. So yeah, I would say I definitely had challenges with the lack of body double when living on my own, but I got things done. It just took me a lot longer to get those things done.
Yeah.
And then even with doing those tasks, something that is helpful for me is just having music playing. I literally have music playing at all times. I just have like a soundtrack to my life happening at all times. So when I'm getting ready in the morning, I have music playing on a speaker, and at work I have music playing in my headphones while I'm doing my notes. And then in my car, obviously I have music playing. So my Spotify music listening is off the charts. At the end of the year, they have that little wrap up thing. It's always an astronomical amount of music I just always have going in the background. I can't do podcasts though, because I know a lot of people do podcasts while they're doing tasks. I know you're like that. But for me, I cannot do that because I have to, again, it's like an attention thing. I have to listen to what they're saying and I can't do my task. So I have to just have music playing that's just mindless, that's just background noise. But anyways, those are all things that are helpful for me on a day-to-day basis.
And the music that you mainly listen to is very tranquil,
Yeah.
smooth, chill vibes.
Yeah.
So, in case that's helpful for anyone, like what kind of music should I be listening to? So, it's not up tempo music
Yeah.
that can maybe be a shock to your system.
It's not even it's so funny. Even when I work out and I listen to music, I listen to very chill music while I'm working out. And it's so funny because I know everyone's listening to like screamo or like really heavy beats or whatever. I don't know what people listen to. But yeah, my music is always very chill at all times. Even my upbeat, quote unquote upbeat music is still very chill. But that's just that's what works for me. You can do whatever works for you, obviously, but that's just what's helpful for me in my brain.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So if you guys have any other tips that you guys do with your ADHD journey or your spouse or your partner or whoever you know that has ADHD, let us know if what works for you. Or if you have any questions about my process, about my diagnosis, about how I went about that, how to even find a psychiatrist, let us know. We can let you know in a DM or in an email. You can email us at semidaysquad@gmail.com. That's SEMIDEY @gmail.com. Or you can DM us on Instagram at the Married Therapists. And as always, if you guys have any questions or any tips or concerns, let us know. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all of that.